congressional maps in a number of states going into the 2022 midterms. Critics say that many of the maps favor Republican candidates in some states, dilute the electoral power of minority voters, but also Democrats redistricting in states. One of the states most effective, Tennessee, where lawmakers have taken the diverse area around Nashville, broken it into 3 districts. My next guest recently announced plans to retire following this term after determining he no longer had a path for victory under this new map. Joining me now to discuss, Congressman Jim Cooper. He's a Democrat from Tennessee. Congressman, we appreciate you taking the time this morning.
Great to be with you, Jim.
You've served in Congress for decades. You have a reputation for being someone who could work across the aisle and pass legislation across the aisle. Does this march towards even further gerrymandering make it virtually impossible for someone like you to be elected, whether in Tennessee or elsewhere?
Yes, Jim, you've got it exactly right. This will freeze national politics for about 10 years as both types of states, R and D, try to lock in their advantage for a decade. It's a shame because we've got to work across the aisle to get things done. Every American voter really wants that underneath, even the partisans, because they want our nation to be successful.
The thing is, this Supreme Court has made it clear that they're very open to deferring to states on this, state legislatures. The Alabama case most recently particularly notable because it seems to knock down the rest of the Voting Rights Act in terms of allowing gerrymandering that explicitly grouped virtually all the African-American voters in that state into one district.
It's a shame because the court could play a very constructive role here. They've chosen not to. They don't want to enter the so-called political thicket. And yet they do all the time, like with the Alabama case you just mentioned. They're essentially making one mainly black district there as opposed to 2 challenge districts in which people of any race or color or party could be elected. So they've chosen to do this, and this neglectful attitude toward U.S. politics could end up hurting our country more severely than the justices realize.
Is the Republican Party or Republican-led state legislatures deliberately targeting race with these maps?
Absolutely. Well, that's their number one goal, and it has been really since Richard Nixon had his Southern strategy. You know, LBJ predicted that when he signed the civil rights laws, that would hurt the Democratic Party in the South for 40 years. He underestimated the problem. Now, it's still the right thing to do, but it's a shame to see the party of Lincoln, the Republicans, abandon Lincoln's principles.
Now, the Democratic Party has other issues going into this election beyond redistricting. You've seen the polling on the generic ballot. Montana Senator Jim Tester just told the Axe Files, David Axelrod's podcast, the following. I honestly don't think the Democratic Party can be a majority party unless we start appealing to middle America a lot more. I'm talking about the area between the 2 mountain ranges, the Appalachians and the Rocky Mountains. And if we're able to do that, I think we will provide success. You're in that area between the Appalachians and the Rocky Mountains. Do the Democrats, in your view, have a losing message for the midterms?
Well, we shouldn't let the coasts dominate. Now, the coasts are fine, but the heartland of America is the heartland of our country. We've got to appreciate those folks because they are the true value keepers of our nation. And Senator Tester is right. Not only reach out to middle America, but to rural America. So often we forget that rural people, we love farmers markets in cities, but you can't have a farmers market without farmers.
No question. We are seeing some course corrections or attempted course corrections by Democrats, Democratic governors lifting mask mandates. They're clearly seeing the changing politics there. Biden focusing more on crime and inflation. Do you think those course corrects are sufficient?
Well, Americans have always been a rebellious, anti-tax, and small government people. And Democrats are too often identified as the party of government. And we should be a party of government that really works to help people. And unless we can show that we do that, we're going to have a hard time at the polls.
So one way to show how to do that, at least in the view of the president and Democratic leaders, was to pass the Build Back Better Act. It's not going to pass as it is. There are discussions now about something pared down, and Biden himself has talked about passing big chunks of it. Can the party, does it have the votes to pass big chunks of it or even medium-sized chunks of it before the midterms?
Well, Jim, you know there's always more that can be done, but look at the infrastructure bill. That is law. And every president had promised one for decades, and only Joe Biden was able to get it done. Now, it's totally bipartisan. I'm ashamed that no Republican in Tennessee would vote for it. But Republicans all over America are happy to vote for it, including Mitch McConnell. So the accomplishments are great. The accomplishments should be appreciated. But, you know, the public mood is fickle. Remember George H.W. Bush? He was at 90% of the polls right before he lost to Bill Clinton. So the public mood will matter.
It sounds like, though, that you're almost saying, hey, we should just be satisfied with infrastructure and go from there. Are you saying you don't think it's likely that you pass more?
I'm working hard for Build Back Better, but the problem there is the Senate, and that hinges on one vote, and one senator just had a stroke this week. It's a very iffy matter when you have a 50-50 Senate. So the public needs to factor that in. I hope senators will come to their senses and realizes that almost all the Build Back Better package is popular with everybody, and we should pass it and make it become law.